Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Spiritual Wanderlust podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Deutsch, and today I am excited to introduce you to a little-known poet whose work deserves wide attention. I've been sharing her writings with all of my friends. She reminds me of a modern-day Rumi or Hafiz, and if you haven't read them, Rumi or Hafiz, start there and then go pick up the work of our guest today, Chelan Harkin. Chelan has two goals in her life and in her writing: that of bringing acceptance, belonging, and worth to all of our uncomfortable emotions that we've been taught to hate, and to make room for our hearts in a very heady world, and allowing that heartful wisdom and truth and inspiration to flow. Chelan has a pretty wild publishing story filled with what she calls prayer experiments gone right. Her first two books are called Susceptible to Light and Let Us Dance, The Stumble and Whirl with the Beloved. Her third book, Wild Grace, is on the way. Today we're going to read and discuss some of her poetry, talk about difficult emotions, and what all of that has to do with mysticism. So, Chelan, thank you for joining us. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's a true pleasure and joy to be here.
Yeah. Well, I've been excited to talk. First of all, not many of us have met mystic poets, let alone ones in the wisdom stream of Rumi and Hafiz. So, how is a mystic poet made? Like, how would you describe your spiritual background?
Ooh, my poetic background, particularly.
Sure.
That's a good question. Well, and it gets at this question of what the heck does mysticism even mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and maybe people have varying definitions, but for me, what it means is keeping my heart open and unclogged, so to speak, with and in my experience, the way that we keep our hearts clogged, that's not a very poetic word, clogged. It's got to be something better, but
it's visceral though. And you feel that word.
Gross too. Is we do that by in my experience through rejecting and repressing our uncomfortable emotions that are really, they're just energy that wants to flow, and in my experience really actually teach us and nourish us and help us grow to this wisdom. And so a lot of my work has been reframing relationship with those things to basically just keep channels open to receive the information that wants to flow through me. So it has like a very humble actually quality to it. And it's really special though, because I find that really the more I'm able to accept just the deepest, most, embarrassing human humble struggles inside of my heart, the more this, what I guess I could call this wild grace flows, and my poetry deepens, and more insight is given. So that is sort of in a nutshell my life practice.
Yeah. How would you describe that? Like, is that a spiritual practice for you, or how would you say it overlaps with your spirituality?
Yeah, I would say it very much is my spirituality. And I love thinking of spiritual practice as very, very holistic. And I actually feel that it has to be to really work. And we can have kind of, if we have ideological concepts, or if we have perspectives about the world that really help our hearts open and help us be more honest and truthful, and that will benefit our mental, emotional health and all of that. And so yeah, I feel like that really is a core piece of my spiritual life and practice.
Yes, I love that. I think it's so easy to, there's certainly a trend now to embrace our bodies and live in a more embodied way, but I think so many of us don't really know what that means. We're like, okay, yoga, or maybe focus on my breathing or something, but it's like embodiment is so much more than that. Like being able to embrace the whole of who you are, especially all of those sensations and emotions and reactions and all those things that come with it.
You said it beautifully. Yes.
I'm curious. It's one thing to embrace, I don't know, like, okay, I have anger toward, how the political world is right now, or, something kind of on a grand scale. But I'm wondering how you do that kind of in the nitty-gritty daily stuff. You're a mother, right? You have two kids?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
What does that look like as a mom of two kids when it's like sometimes you have sleepless nights and sometimes kids are screaming and sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I can't even handle this. How do you accept all the uncomfortable in the midst of that? Can you share an example?
Oh, what a good question. Yeah. And of course, often I don't, and I just am an asshole to my kids. And then I have to apologize and tell them what was going on, in me and why I acted that way.
Mm.
But yeah, really, I feel like just doing my best to come back, because with any practice, right, the practices are the things we come back to. It's not the things that we always are perfect at or constantly remember or constantly aligned with. It's the things that we're committed to just coming back to. And so, yeah, actually, and I feel like mothering, this relationship with my kids is also just, it's my primary, you could say it's like my primary temple for my spiritual practice, which is just trying to be humble and truthful with them about what my challenges, not in a way that's, developmentally inappropriate for them, but just say like, oh, I really want to play with you right now. That means so much to me. I care about you, but I'm really struggling today with some sadness and I need a time to take care of my feelings. You want to just sit by me? Things like that. But it's tough because that's kind of, I find it's confrontational for myself with my own models of how parents are supposed to be, which is we're supposed to know, we're supposed to always have our, shit together. And we're supposed to be, it's a power over model. So it's sort of an experiment. It's this way that I'm trying to craft with my sweet kids, but it seems to work. The findings are pretty good.
Yes.
So yeah,
I love that. So we have this women mystic school going on this year. So I've been reading a lot of like female mystics and such. And I love how much mystics, particularly women, tend to turn spirituality on its head like that. Because I think so often the images that we have, especially in more kind of male models of spirituality, is this ascent upwards. It's like the ladder of perfection, climbing the mountain to divine union, or whatever it is. And,
totally.
And I feel like so many of the women are like, no, and I kind of wonder if it does have to do with like the fact how like messy we know that our bodies are. And so life is messy when you have kids, when you just like face the reality of the world, you're like, oh yeah, we're not going to look all perfect at the top of that mountain of, divine union. We're going to look like a big hot mess. And that's how we do it.
Doesn't that feel better?
Oh my gosh.
If I'm around someone who is like, spiritually perfect or whatever, or on the top of the mountain and I'm far from the top of the mountain, I'm just going to feel probably bad about myself. But if I'm with someone who's just in a loving, open, accepting space about the human ongoing struggles, along with the beautiful human capacity to continue to understand new dimensions of self and love, and that just feels way more
more human and more realistic,
more realistic. Exactly.
Yes.
Kelly. Yeah, we're speaking the same language. Yeah.
Yes. It's unfortunate that traditionally people think of mystics as like someone cast in marble, like on a pedestal somewhere, like, oh, well, that's for them, and I feel like it's almost like projecting, we talk about projecting our shadows, but this is like projecting our light side, like, oh, well, if Mother Teresa was that good and I can just be like, wow, I mean, the Mother Teresas of the world can do that. But I mean, clearly I could never be that heroic. It's like, it almost like, is an excuse for us just to be mediocre or not have to shine.
That's so interesting. That was a big, yeah, absolutely. And that was a big kind of moment for me. I realized I'd kind of made this hierarchy with, with poets in my mind, and the value that they could offer to the world. And we can do that with classic poets like Rumi, And while they do deserve tremendous, honor and celebration, I don't think that my feeling is they wouldn't have wanted to have hierarchy experience effect, but to really just continue to crack open other hearts to and poetry to be able to do its best to be a kindred of theirs, and I don't know, I think there's so many ways that we make these hierarchies.
Yes.
And it's empowering to think as hell to do something to dismantle those. Anyway.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that's true of so many, of any wisdom teacher worth their salt. I was talking to somebody else the other day about, they were like, Jesus wasn't about Jesus. He was about like pointing to divine union, And so if we focus on, just like and fixate, or whether it's Rumi or Hafiz or whoever, like if we're like, oh my gosh, I want to be like them. And they're like, no, do what I do, like do what I'm about, it's not me.
Totally. Yeah. And there's, and I find too, like, we really do ourselves a disservice when we reject the continual struggle of being a person, because they're really, when we can be on a path to being in, more accepting relationship with those parts, there's just amazing gifts too to receive there. So it's not like, I don't know, there's this idea of transcendence, which I feel like is kind of a spiritual jargon for fleeing to some degree. Like, it's just human emotions, there's human experiences that just, don't can be undone. And but I feel like, I don't know, there's a limitation in that approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have like 16 questions I want to ask you. Tell me first, so obviously Rumi and Hafiz are big influences for you, and I'm curious how you discovered them, what role they've played in your life, and also just the broader umbrella of Sufism. Is that something that's an important part of your world, or how would you describe your relationship with it?
Thanks. Good question. So the truth is, I know very, very little about Sufism. I'd love to learn more. But I was exposed to Hafez poetry in a therapy session, actually, when I was 17. And I felt like therapy wasn't working for me, but I hadn't been exposed to other models that could do something to help me feel more, comfortable in myself. And so I kind of thought talk therapy was, that was it. And so I was feeling a lot of despair about my own forward movement. And my therapist read me a Hafez poem, and it was such an incredible moment in my life, really. It was like, first of all, somehow this little poem was like this master key that just, albeit momentarily, unlocked all of these walls around my heart that had felt so complex and impassable. And so it gave me this experience of a conscious experience of like, oh, okay, actually, amidst all of these layers and complexes and whatnot, like, oh, here I am. So there was a moment of that, which was so healing, but also there was like this whatever that poem is. I didn't know, I wasn't even familiar with the word mystic, but just whatever that poem was, whatever that carried, like, this is what I meant. It was like a destiny moment, what I meant to do. So that was a really, really powerful experience. And then, Hafez, primarily the poetry of Hafez rendered by Daniel Ladinsky, really helped me craft, not even craft, it really just unlocked the possibility of a new relationship with God. And there's so many implications to that when we can think of God, or just the universe, or whatever we give authority to, as something that can be loving and intimate and close and like unconditionally accepting and loving and joyful.
Yes.
A lot of things on its head. And so that really helped inspire me down that path.
Can I ask you to read your poem, Eccentric God? I feel like that's like a perfect moment for that poem.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Here we go. If you think the eccentric God who made the octopus is going to judge you for your sins, I'm afraid you've missed the mark. If you think this wild God that spins galaxies as a pastime cares to get fussy about your mistakes, or has ever made anything that wasn't born perfect and luminous, you might need to repent. If you can't yet admit how lovable and infinitely worthy the fullness of your human nature is, and if you think God wants to do anything but perpetually pour an abundance of love gifts upon you, well, my dear, your soul just might need to go to confession.
I love that one.
Thank you.
Yes. And I think that's so just appropriate for this theme of recognizing how much more vast the divine is than our preconceived notions, or even just what we've been taught, you know, whether in Sunday school or just in the common culture of this kind of Zeus-like God in the sky, you know, and we're like, yeah, let's leave him to the Greeks, you know, like there's something so much more profound. And what really needs transformation is not so much like all of these like imperfections that we sometimes obsess over, but our image of God and how tender and intimate he is.
Yes, absolutely.
Was that a transformation that happened for you, or, you know, was God always a fairly loving image for you?
Well, so I grew up in the Baha'i faith. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but there's a lot of just kind of there's a lot of just beautiful perspective about the divine, but nonetheless, we still get baggaged with kind of, yeah, like you said, like common cultural paradigms about God. And so I really felt loaded with those, actually. And I had a really profound experience, though. At age 21, I did a Baha'i pilgrimage. I was by myself. I went to Israel and went to all the holy places. And toward the end of this 9-day pilgrimage, we went to Baha'u'llah, who's the founder of the Baha'i faith. We went to his prison cell. He was in prison for like 40 years or something. And I had this strange desire in my heart to be in that space alone. And I was kind of perplexed by that desire. And I was in a group of about 40 people, and we would enter these spaces, and we would have time to pray and meditate. And some people in the group would just like pray for or meditate for like an hour and a half. And I didn't have that attention span. So I thought, okay, there's no way I'm going to get this. But I had this desire in my heart, and just had this very profound and strange and wild and transformational experience in that space. We all sat down, and I closed my eyes and heard no commotion or no sounds or anything. And it just felt like I'd closed my eyes for seconds, but I opened my eyes. Everyone had left this prison cell, and the door was closed. And it's like right on the sea, and it was this thrashing, stormy day. And I was in this place of really feeling like I desperately needed a breakthrough and kind of authentic connection with myself or with God or with all things, you know. And I sort of looked around and sort of took stock of like, wow, this is kind of wild. And I was just sort of, the only way to describe it is not like I heard a voice, but it was more like I was filled with a voice. It was like louder and clearer than, you know, any voice I could have heard. Like every cell was resonating with this voice that said, "Let us dance." And it was this, you know, poetry has this quality of like, it can just sort of, it's kind of can be like energy work, and it can just unlock understanding and unlock old blocks and allow things to flow again. And that was just precisely what I needed. And I took it as this message from the divine, like, let us dance, let us have a dynamic, authentic relationship. Let this be a stumble and a whirl. Just be you in all of yourself. And I just had this profound catharsis and this profound bliss. And I also, similarly to when I'd encountered Hafez poetry for the first time, I had this absolute knowing that I would write a book one day called Let Us Dance. Yeah. And it was like that experience really unlocked this creative magic. And then really almost as soon as I returned home, not more than a week later, poetry just started to pour through me. And it went from this process of like struggling to craft a poem and kind of being, I don't know, stressed and tense about it, to just like, boom, opening wide and just really having to write fast as it would come through. So anyway, that was a really powerful moment and experience in my life. And that felt like the beginning of this journey of both accessing and expressing a much more authentic way.
So between that time of kind of this unlocking and unleashing moment, what happened between that and your book being published? I mean, was it a long and lengthy process, or what did that look like?
Yeah, good question. It was about 11 years. So I had all of this poetry just flowing, and I had so much trust in it. I had this strange like trust that just the words were just as they were supposed to be. And I don't know, there was a rightness to it that I didn't experience that in any other area of my life.
Yeah.
And I felt incredible confidence in this poetry, and it was my most powerful connection with the beyond. It's still very mysterious to me how it works, but I was still I had all these hangups about how other people would receive it. And I was really insecure about that because it was so precious to me. I was afraid of rejection and criticism and whatever, and from others, and that somehow this thing, that was most important, most primary, most essential, most beautiful, somehow wouldn't translate or whatever. So I really kept it quite small. I would share my poems online, to basically my mom and 3 of her friends or whatever were my gung-ho supporters.
Yeah.
And then in 2020, really, well, I connected actually with a dear friend, like a very important person in my life for some reason. And he is Sufi, and he and I have this way of when we connect, there's this incredible, so just unlocking of essence and joy. Like I have that with him, like I've never experienced with another. And he just reached out to me, and we just had some exchanges, and it just activated this place of light inside of myself. And I'd been really creatively uninspired more than ever since this process had opened. And I just was kind of like, in this place of something's got to change, and not sure what that is. And I just had a baby, and it was like postpartum, and it was 2020, all of these things both that had gotten me so uncomfortable that I was ready for a change. And then just connection with this dear friend, I don't know, it was like just the spark that I needed to kind of light this like dry tinderbox. And he's also just deeply encouraged my poetry. And so it was kind of like this, okay, what the hell? Like it became very clear it's time to move forward publishing his book.
Yes, and I understand there was a connection with another big Hafiz fan / translator. Can you share a bit of that story and how that came about?
Most definitely, Daniel Ladinsky. So Daniel Ladinsky has done renderings of Hafez poetry. So he doesn't actually translate them; they're not direct translations. But he's, inspired by Hafez poetry, and he's an amazing poet in his own right. And he's done a lot to really make Hafez like a superstar to the Western world. Anyway, so when I decided, okay, I'm going to publish my poetry, I had no connections in the marketing world. I had one friend who had successfully published, or a distant acquaintance really, who had published some books, but I had almost no contacts. So I was just, anyway, so I bought a couple of Daniel Hafez books because I remember the formatting was really pretty. So I thought, I'm just going to, use something similar to that. So I bought his books, and opened them up and just had this really strangely powerful urge or impulse really to do a prayer experiment, which is, we get all kinds of thoughts all the time, and so many of them we just don't listen to, or we just totally ignore, or at least I do. And but this, like, I couldn't let it go. And the prayer experiment was to go on a nightly walk and just chat with my favorite dead poet Hafez and ask for, first of all, just ask for inspiration. And so I did that. I did that every night. And poetry started flowing in such a torrential way that it started to be almost an inconvenience to my life. Like I had committed to just really honoring, like when it felt like the muse was pouring, to really like prioritize that. And I mean, it was coming so fast and furious, it was absurd. So about a third of these books, or of these poems in this book, came through in these 3 weeks before publication. And it was so nuts, Kelly, that then I thought, okay, something's happening here.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask my favorite dead poet for marketing help, because I don't have any of that in this world yet.
Yeah.
And why not give it a try? And so I thought, I don't want Hafez to feel overloaded, so let's get him a team. So I asked Khalil Gibran to join the team, a few other, favorite dead authors, and I just would go on these wacky prayer walks and just say, like, hey, you all, don't know if prayer works, but it doesn't hurt to ask. Would you just like tap all the people in the spirit world who have any kind of marketing know-how, and also just like tap everyone in this plane too who can support me? I just deeply, with all my heart, want this book to go out there and to be received widely in the name of love and truth and liberation and joy. And it was just such a genuine prayer, and so fun to say. And I felt, half just kind of kooky saying it, but whatever. And so anyway, so then 3 weeks though into this publishing journey, I get an email in my inbox from Daniel Ladinsky.
Like, what?
Out of nowhere, saying, Chelan, hi, I don't know if you know who I am, but I'm Daniel Ladinsky, and he said,
in this fangirling.
I was, you have no freaking idea how it was. And he said, yeah, I found your book. Congratulations. And he said, it's actually weird that I reached out to you, Chelan, because I'm kind of a reclusive poet and I rarely reach out to anybody, but felt the nudge. And so I just responded to him in the most unfiltered way, just, oh my effing God, are you serious, Daniel? And I just told him the whole story. Like, I sent it to him unedited. It was the most surreal experience, Kelly. From someone who had, truly had almost no poetic exposure before this. My primary poetic inspiration, who I'd been praying to our shared muse, like, it was nuts. And then Daniel wrote back to me and said, okay, well, that's clearly why I reached out to you. And he said, I've never suggested this either with someone that I haven't known quite well, but I think you and I should wade into co-publishing a book together.
Oh my.
Oh my God. And that was just the most insane moment of my life. And yeah.
Wow.
And then he wrote the foreword for my first book and has just endorsed me with his incredible poetic praise to the major publishing houses of the world. And it's just been crazy. It's been unbelievable.
That's remarkable.
But
I'm also so glad, because there's such great, I don't know, just rich tidbits, hidden in every poem, and so I really do hope that it finds a very wide audience.
Thank you.
I'm sure this is a difficult question, but do you have a current favorite poem?
Ooh, well, there are two that are particularly meaningful to me. I don't know that I could choose between them.
Okay.
The first, can I just give you a mini story about both? So the first is called Say Wow.
Okay.
And this is the poem that was my first poem that just poured through me after that experience in Israel. And it feels like a first love. And it also, I had another kind of self-experiment that I did before this poem came through, and it was to allow myself to write a bad poem every day for 3 days. And I just said, I'm going to give myself an hour. I'm just going to let come what comes, and I'm going to share it. And giving myself that permission, kind of like integrating my self-judgments into my process rather than just resisting them and fearing that I would write a bad poem, was also, I think, a big piece in this unlocking. So maybe would you like to hear it?
Can I read? Please.
So I wrote this when I was 21, and it changed in a lasting way my whole poetic expressive paradigm.
Yeah.
Say wow. Each day, before our surroundings become flat with familiarity, and the shapes of our lives click into place, dimensionless and average as Tetris cubes. Before hunger knocks from our bellies like a cantankerous old man, and the duties of the day stack up like dishes, and the architecture of our basic needs commissions all thought to construct the four-door sedan of safety. Before gravity clings to our skin like a cumbersome parasite, and the colored dust of dreams sweeps itself obscure in the vacuum of reason. Each morning, before we wrestle the world and our heart into the shape of our brain, look around and say, wow. Feed yourself fire. Scoop up the day entire like a planet-sized bouquet of marvel sent by the universe directly into your arms, and say, wow. Break yourself down into the basic components of primitive awe, and let the crescendo of each moment carbonate every capillary, and say, wow. Yes, before our poems become calloused with revision, let them shriek off the page of spontaneity. And before our metaphors get too regular, let the sun stay, a conflagration of homing pigeons that fights through fire each day to find us.
Yummy. That's wonderful.
Thank
I feel that in my bones, like feed yourself fire. Like I love that.
Oh, thank
Made
you.
me think of I don't know if you've ever heard the story. There's a little tale told of one of the desert fathers, those early hermits in the first few centuries, and someone went to this like holy hermit, and was like, I'm doing, my spiritual practices, I'm fasting, I'm doing all of these disciplines, like what else must I do, in order to achieve like the heights of, spiritual union. Yeah. And apparently this Abba, this desert father, turned to him, and his hands turned into 10 living flames, and he's like, you must become all fire. I was like, yes. This is like the best ever, but that image of just like, I don't know, it's desire, it's longing, it's passion, it's eros, is really what I think that kind of divine energy is. And I love how well you express it.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm curious, like, these poems have so much like richness and depth to them. Where do you have particular points of inspiration in life, or is it literally just like it's pouring through me and I'm just taking notes?
Yeah, it's pretty much that.
That's remarkable.
It's pretty much that. It really is pretty much that. But it's not, yeah. And again, though, it doesn't feel like it's random. Like my main work, I suppose, as a poet, it's not the traditional, I'm going to sit down at this time, I'm going to just make something happen, even if I'm not inspired. It's really away from the writing, and it is just, it's just this deep kind of emotional, energetic work of acceptance, and moving energy through, and finding that, that energy just has somehow inspiration and information within it, which is amazing. And then it just sort of comes when it does. It sort of feels like a wild river.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you go through dry spells? Are there times where you're like, I just can't write?
Yeah. Well, yes, definitely. So before this publishing breakthrough, like I said, it was really 2 years of just it was a drought. It was a creative drought, and it was God, it was uncomfortable. But the truth is, since I published these books, it's been such, oops, there we go. It's been such an ongoing process of it's been a transformational journey. Absolutely. So I feel like my theory is that, yeah, inspiration and really just change and growth are kind of like, there's a friction almost maybe in growth, or there's an openness really in growth, that it creates an inner environment that can kind of invite inspiration. So I feel that actually it's just been really full on in these last almost 2 years now, because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a gift.
It's been an incredible gift. It's a real
Yeah.
honor and gift. Yeah.
How have you grown and changed personally as a result of this experience?
Oh, such a good question. Well, so I said that I was afraid to share my poetry with people in a pretty big way for 11 years, and I just felt a lot more safe hiding this most kind of precious and true part of myself. And really that had been a lifelong pattern as someone. So growing up in the Baha'i faith in a small town, it was mostly Christian, I felt super weird. And I had a kind of a interesting combo of both real love and gratitude for all that I had received from being exposed to, the Baha'i teachings and the Baha'i community, but also I was just super ashamed to be weird and different. And then also just as just a highly sensitive person, but also with like a powerful, keen sense of perception, a powerful like sense of truth and voice. Like I already kind of felt like an outsider on those levels. And so I just had this way of, well, I mean, at the most primary level, I had a pattern of really repressing my truth and my voice, and I was afraid that it would be somehow confrontational to society's comforts or my family's comforts or whatever. And so I was afraid that it was a liability more than an asset. And so so bringing forth these books, it was so much more than just, I just published my books. It was so much more than that. It was really like the biggest self-claiming of my life and the biggest risk and experiment of my life. It was like I don't know, it was like a major mystical coming out experience. Like,
Yeah.
it was an experience of really being seen in these ways never allowed before. And so it's changed everything. And I feel like I'm really have found and I'm finding my tribe in the people that really resonate, having such deeper and more meaningful connections. Yeah. And because this was such a foundational part of myself, there's just no way to bring that up and forward and out without every other structure rearranging and releasing. So yeah, I feel that truly everything has changed. And I've also really aligned with what I feel I'm most here to give the world and my sacred service. And before that, I felt pretty disoriented and dissatisfied about really a sense of purpose. So yeah.
Yes, it's interesting how many, I feel like a lot of our listeners have either gone through or are potentially scared of their own spiritual coming out. We have a lot of folks who grew up in like a more, fundamentalist form of like Christianity or something, that was very kind of rigid in some ways. And when you discover this this field, sometimes I like to talk about it as Rumi's field, like out in that field beyond right and wrong. Like, I'll meet you there, and when we hang out there, like everybody else who's, still within the paddock and their nice, comfortable fences, I mean, that's somehow threatening to them. They feel like it's dangerous,
Yes.
and you're like, but it's so spacious out here and really kind of exciting. Like, and when you can fully embrace it and find other people out there, like you said, find a tribe, oh man, that's like the most thrilling thing in the world. I mean, most of the time we just feel really alone because all of a sudden you're on the outside of that fence. You're like, what have I done? Like, what?
Oh, you said it. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
It's the most thrilling, wonderful, wonderful gift to move beyond those confines and like you said, see that it's okay out here. It's not only okay, it's so much better. It's so much more comfortable and wonderful and spacious. And then find others who can resonate with you there is so, it's just the most beautiful thing.
Yes, it really is. I love how much it's the space is just blossoming and how many people are finding these different wisdom traditions.
Same.
Yes. If you had to speak to, let's say, your 20-year-old self, before this kind of opening happened in like Israel and the pilgrimage and all of that, what kind of advice do you think you'd give her?
Ooh, I would absolutely affirm her my power and gifts in my sensitivity and what essential medicine is there. And I would affirm how hard it is to navigate the world as a sensitive person, and how brave that is. And I would, but yeah, I would affirm that more than anything. Yeah.
Yes.
And I would tell her that the root of all behaviors that we can judge ourselves for that feel limited and are the root of all these whatever dysfunctional behaviors that we can get up to, there's innocence at the root of all of these. Yeah. Yep.
That's interesting. I just resonate with both of those because I feel like two major life lessons for me were learning about what it means to be a highly sensitive person and to have like a sensitive nervous system, and just what that means for your own body, your experience in the world, your expectations of other people, like trying to, having like vulnerability hangovers, like trying to share with somebody who just, isn't able to receive on the level of depth that I'm so hungry for, like that whole thing.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Yes. So like that whole world has been incredibly helpful. And then also just everything in like psychological, emotional maturity and learning what trauma is and all of our inner world, our parts that are trying so desperately just to help us,
Right.
Yeah. It's like, don't demonize that. It's trying to help. So it might be done in a really imperfect way, but there's something good happening under there.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes. So I completely understand and resonate with a lot of that life wisdom.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we have just a couple of minutes left. Is there any bits of wisdom or pieces that we haven't talked about yet, or any poems that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, I would love to share a poem and then also just quickly rattle off a couple of upcoming things that I'm so excited about. So Daniel Ladinsky and I are collaborating on a book. It's this adorable, playful, sweet book. It's going to be called Two Zucchini Dancing. And it's a book of haiku, sweet haiku from the kitchen. And it's illustrated and there's going to be a couple of recipes of mine and Daniel's in this book. And it is going to be so sweet. So look at that. Also, I just, in a few days, really, it'll release this incredible, beautiful book with this extraordinary sacred collage artist. And she's taken snippets of my poetry that she was inspired by and just creates these really ethereal, exquisite, almost like mandala collages with them that just rock my world. So it's called Taste the Sky. And that will be available soon. Also, you can buy my books if you'd like to, Susceptible to Light and Let Us Dance, The Stumble and Whirl with the Beloved, on Amazon, or you can get signed copies from my local Wacoma bookstore. And I love to stay connected with people. If this spoke to you, you can find me on Facebook. Following, you just click follow and then we'll stay connected. That would be such a joy. And there's actually one more book that's coming out too. I'm hosting this really special poetry space with aspiring poets who want to learn about the publishing process. And it's a 10-week course, and it's all about encouragement of their poetry, and then walking them through every step of the publishing and marketing process. And then we put the book together at the end, and I market it to my audience, and they get all this exposure, and it's been magical. So that will be called Bouquet of Stars, and that's coming soon too. So check that out. And then can I end with a poem, Kelly?
Please, I would love that.
Thank you so much. This has been such a joy. I don't want it to end.
I agree.
I feel like we're just getting started here, Kelly. So this poem is called The Worst Thing, and this one I put out on Facebook maybe a day before I published this book, and really hesitated to publish it because it makes assertions about God, and I kind of wondered, do I have the right to do that? But this went quite viral and has been the source that has opened so many doors. So The Worst Thing. The worst thing we ever did was put God in the sky, out of reach, pulling the divinity from the leaf, sifting out the holy from our bones, insisting God isn't bursting dazzlement through everything we've made a hard commitment to see as ordinary, stripping the sacred from everywhere to put in a cloud man elsewhere, prying closeness from your heart. The worst thing we ever did was take the dance and the song out of prayer, made it sit up straight and cross its legs, removed it of rejoicing, wiped clean its hip sway, its questions, its ecstatic yowl, its tears. The worst thing we ever did is pretend God isn't the easiest thing in this universe, available to every soul in every breath.
Marvelous.
Thank you.
I fully support this vision of the world with the sacred in everything. And I don't think anyone could have put it quite so poetically. Thank you for sharing that. That was marvelous. And I hope that we can all recover that sense of not just this like reverential sacred, but the mischievous sacred that winks at us from all things.
Yes. Oh, hallelujah to that.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Yes. Thank you, Chelan. This was delightful. Everyone listening, please do check out Chelan's work either on Facebook or you can check out her website. It's just chelanharkin.com, right?
Yeah, there's a new website coming in a few days, but for now, yep, chelanharkin.com.
Okay.
Yep, thank you. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for listening and